Chapter 2 Backgammon. It was round 13 of the annual tourney. Only 3 players remained, 2 with 1 loss each. These 2 had to play each other. The loser would be eliminated from the tourney, and the winner would meet the single undefeated player. The 2 who played were as different as seemed possible. One was a huge, fat, middle-aged man in voluminous and princely robes inset with glittering gems. The other was a tiny, naked man, muscular and fit, in his 30s.
"Ah, Stile," the clothed man said affably. "I was hoping to encounter you."
You know of me, sir?"
"I always research my prospective opponents, Surf. You have been extremely busy recently. You've been chasing around the landscape, crashing vehicles, and disappearing between rounds."
Stile was noncommittal. "My time between rounds is my own, sir."
"Except for what that girl robot demands."
"Is it fun making time with a sexy machine?" Stile knew the citizen was trying to rattle him, to get him tangled up emotionally so that he would not concentrate properly on the game. It was a familiar technique. Stile could not return the favor because all citizens were virtually anonymous to serfs, and in any event a serf could not treat a citizen with disrespect. So Stile would have to take it, and play his best regardless. He was experienced at this sort of thing. The citizen would probably rattle himself before he got to Stile. It was time for the grid. Each man stood on one side of the unit, looking at the screen. There were 16 boxes facing Stile, labeled across the top: 1 physical, 2 mental, 3 chance, 4 arts, and down the side: A naked, B tool, C machine, D animal. Stile's panel was lighted by the letters.
"That was a very neat stunt you worked last round," the citizen remarked, "making that Amazon throw away her win. Of course, you know you won't be able to trick me that way."
"Of course not, sir." Stile touched the tool indication. That was his line of greatest strength. The subgrid showed 3B, tool-assisted chance. Stile groaned inwardly. The chance column was the bane of good players. It was difficult to make his skill count here.
"You don't like it, huh?" the citizen taunted. "Figure it to come up another slot machine? Wash you out painlessly, huh?"
This man really had researched Stile's prior games of the tourney. The lone game Stile had lost had been just that way. "I am not partial to it, sir." As long as he handled the needling without heat, he was gaining.
"Well, I'm partial to it.
Know why?
Because I'm lucky. Try me on poker, Stile. I'll come up with a full house and trump you. Try me on blackjack. I'm all 21s. The breaks always go my way. That scares you, huh?"
The citizen protested too much. That could indicate weakness, or could be a ruse. Stile actually could handle himself in games of chance. Often there was more skill than showed. He would try for a suitable variant. "Luck is impartial, sir."
"You believe that? You fool. Try me on dice, if you doubt."
Stile made his selection. The citizen had already made his. The third grid showed board games of chance.
"Okay, sucker, try me on Monopoly," the citizen urged.
But when they played it through, it came up backgammon.
"My favorite," the citizen exclaimed. "Dice and betting. Watch me move."
Stile thought he was bluffing. That bluff would be called. Stile was expert at backgammon. It was only technically a game of luck. Skill was critical. They adjourned to the boardroom. The table was ready. There was no physical audience. The holograph would take care of that.
"Now, you know this game represents a year," the citizen said. 24 points for the hours of the day, 30 pieces for the days of the month, 12 pieces in each half section for the months in the year.
And the 7 spots on the opposite sides of a die are the days of the week, Stile said. The 2 dice are day and night. It hardly matches the symbolism of the ordinary deck of playing cards or the figures of the chess set, sir. They were playing a variant deriving in part from Acey-Deucey, traditionally a Navy game. The games of Mother Earth had continued to evolve in the fashion of human society, with some variants prospering and others becoming extinct. In this one, no pieces were placed on the board at the start. All started from the bar. It was not necessary to enter all 15 pieces on the board before advancing the leaders. Yet it was still backgammon, the back game, with pieces constantly being sent back to the bar while they ran the gauntlet of opposing pieces. People were apt to assume that a given game had an eternally fixed set of rules, when in fact there were endless variations. Stile had often obtained an advantage by steering a familiar game into an unfamiliar channel. The citizen was, as he claimed, lucky. He won the lead, then forged ahead with double 6s, while Stile had to settle for a 2-to-1 throw of the dice. Doubles were valuable in backgammon because each die could be used twice. Thus the citizen's throw enabled him to enter 4 men to the 6th point, while Stile entered only 2. This continued fairly steadily. The citizen soon had all 15 men entered and well advanced, while Stile was slower. Soon the 2 forces interacted. The citizen hit the first blot. In layman's language, he placed one of his men on the spot occupied by one of Stile's men. That sent Stile's man home to the bar, the starting place. "Sent you home to your slot machine, didn't I?" he chortled. "Oh, let there be no moaning at the bar." That was a literary allusion to an ancient poem by Tennyson on Earth. Stile was conversant with historical literature, but made no response. The citizen was showing pseudo-erudition. He was not the type to know any but the most fashionable of quotes, and he had gotten this one wrong. The correct line was, "and may there be no moaning of the bar." Yet mentally, Stile filled in the remainder, "when I put out to sea." Tennyson had then been late in life, knowing he would die before too long. That poem, Crossing the Bar, had been a kind of personal epitaph. When he put out to sea, in the figurative fashion of the Norse boats for the dead, he hoped to see his pilot, the deity, face to face. Those left behind in life should feel no sorrow for him, for he, like the werewolf, had found his ideal resting place. It was generally best to read the full works of past literary figures and to understand their backgrounds, rather than to memorize quotes out of context. But it was no use to go into all that with this great bore of a citizen. Well, Stile intended to send this obnoxious citizen out to sea. It was already apparent that the man was not a top player. He depended on his luck too heavily, and on a basic strategy of making points, of setting up 2 or more men on a point, so that the opponent could neither land there nor hit a blot. Luck and conservative play, a good enough strategy for most occasions. 3 out of 4 times, a winning strategy. But Stile was not an ordinary player. He depended not on luck, but on skill. Luck tended to equalize, especially on an extended series, while skill was constant. That was what gave the superior player the advantage, even in a game of chance. It was necessary to take risks in order to progress most efficiently. There would be some losses because of these risks, but overall, that efficiency would pay off. Stile was already grasping the weakness of the citizen's mode of play. Probably the man had an imperfect notion of the strategy of the doubling cube, and that would make all the difference, regardless of his vaunted luck. Soon the citizen had a number of men in his home board, ready to be borne off. The first player who bore off all 15 men would win the game, but not necessarily the round. This modification was scored by points. Each man left in play when the opponent finished was 1 point. 100 points was the game. It would take several games to accumulate the total. The key was to minimize one's losses in a losing game and maximize one's winnings in a winning game. That was where the doubling cube came in. Best to test the man's level, however. Stile needed to have a very clear notion of his opponent's vulnerability. Because the citizen was not a complete duffer, he was just good enough to be dangerous. Luck did have an important role in backgammon, just as muscle did in wrestling. It had to be taken into account. Stile rolled 3-2. As it happened, he was able to enter 2 men and hit blots on the second and third points. It was a good break, for the citizen left few blots he could possibly avoid. Thus, Stile's 2 and 3 dice canceled the effect of cumulative scores of 21 and 22 on the citizen's dice. Stile was making his limited luck match the effect of his opponent's good luck. It was a matter of superior management. But the citizen was hardly paying attention to the moves. He was trying to undermine Stile's confidence, convinced that even in a game of chance, a person's certainty counted most. "A number of people have been wondering where you disappear to between rounds, little man. You seem to walk down a certain service corridor and never emerge at the far end. Hours or even days later you emerge, going the opposite direction. It is a food machine service corridor, yet you show no signs of feasting. Now, how can a man disappear from the board like a piece being sent to the bar? It is a mystery." Stile continued playing. "People enjoy mysteries, sir." The dice rolled, the men advanced. The citizen's luck held. He was gaining despite imperfect play. "Mysteries exist only to be resolved. It is possible that you have discovered something fantastic, like a curtain that separates fact from fantasy, that you pass through this invisible barrier to a world where you imagine you are important instead of insignificant." So, the man had done fairly thorough research into Stile's Phaze existence, too. Still, Stile refused to be baited. "No doubt, sir. And can it really be true that in that fantasy you ride a unicorn mare and associate with vampires and werewolves?" "In fantasy, anything is possible," Stile said. "Double," the citizen said, turning the doubling cube to 2. Now the game drew to a close. The citizen finished first. Stile was left with 8 men on the board. Doubled, that was 16 points against him. They set up for the second game, since they were not yet close to the 100 points necessary for the finish. The citizen was obnoxiously affable. He liked winning. Stile hoped he would get careless as well as overconfident. With luck, the citizen might even distract himself at a key time by his determined effort to unnerve Stile. Still, the citizen's luck held. The man played indifferently, even poorly at times, but the fortune of the dice sustained him. When he had a clear advantage, he doubled, and Stile had to accept or forfeit the game. Then Stile had a brief run of luck, actually skillful exploitation of the game situation, and doubled himself. "Double!" the citizen said immediately when his own turn came, determined to have the last word and confident in his fortune. Now the doubling cube stood at 8. "I understand a little squirt like you can use magic to snare some mighty fine-looking women," the citizen said as they played, "even if they're taller than you." "Many women are," Stile agreed. References to his height did irritate him, but he had long since learned to conceal this. He was 1.5 meters tall, or an inch shy of 5 feet in the archaic nomenclature of Phaze. The citizen's infernal luck continued. There did seem to be something to his claim about being lucky. He had certainly had far superior throws of the dice, and in this game, supervised by the game computer, there could be no question of cheating. He was winning this game too, by a narrower margin than the last, but the 8 on the doubling cube gave every piece magnified clout. The citizen liked to double. Maybe it related to his gambling urge. I guess there could be one really luscious doll who nevertheless married a dwarf, the citizen observed with a smirk. I guess she could have been ensorcelled. Must have been. But despite his refusal to be baited about his recent marriage to the Lady Blue, Stile was losing. If this special ploy did not work, he would wash out of the tourney. If only the luck would even out. Or mayhap she has a hang-up about midgets. Sort of like miscegenation. Some people do get turned on that way. The citizen was really trying, but Stile played on calmly. Some do, I understand. Or maybe pederasty. She likes to do it with children. But the effect of that malicious needle was abated by the citizen's choice of the wrong concept. It was generally applicable to the sexual motive of a male, not a female. Still, Stile would gladly have dumped this oaf down a deep well. Stile lost this game too, down 6 men. 48 more points against him, a cumulative total of 64. Another game like this would finish him. The luck turned at last and he won one, but he had only been able to double it once and only pick up 6 points. And the citizen won again, 8 men, redoubled for 32 points. The score now stood at 96-6. The next game could finish it. Still, the citizen's amazing luck held. Had he, after all, found some way to cheat? To fix the dice? Stile doubted it. The tourney precautions were too stringent, and this was an important game, with a large audience. The throws had to be legitimate. Science claimed that luck evened out in the long run. It was difficult to prove that in backgammon. Stile's situation was desperate. Yet there were ways. Stile knew how to play the backgame specialty, and now was the time. When his position looked good, he doubled. When the citizen was clearly ahead, he doubled. But the citizen retained a general advantage, so Stile's doubling seemed foolish. Stile used the backgame to interfere with the citizen's establishment on his home board. Because most of Stile's men had been relegated to the bar, he had them in ready position to attack the citizen's men as they lined up for bearing off. This sort of situation could be a lot more volatile than many people thought. Double, Stile said, turning the cube. You're crazy, the citizen said, redoubling in his turn. Stile hit another blot. He needed more than this to recover a decent position, but it helped. The citizen threw double 6s. That moved his blotted man all the way from the bar to 1 space from the end. His luck was still more than sufficient to swamp whatever break Stile managed. Stile doubled again, though he was still obviously behind. The citizen, when his turn came, laughed and doubled once more. Now the cube stood at 64, its maximum. You really want to go down big, Tyke. They were reduced to 5 men each. The rest had been borne off. The game was actually much closer than the citizen realized. Stile had already won the advantage he sought. If the game had proceeded with only Stile's first doubling, and he won by 2 men, all he would have would be 4 more points. If he lost by that same margin, however, the citizen's 4 points would put him at 100 for final victory. But now the cube stood at 64, so that a 2-man win by the citizen would give him the same victory by an unnecessary margin, while the same win by Stile would give him 128 points, at 1 stroke enough for his final victory. So he had, in effect, evened it up. Instead of being behind by 90 points, he had only to win 2 points. The citizen had been foolish to permit the doubling to go to this level. He had thrown away a major advantage. I hear some of these animals can change to human form, the citizen said. I guess an animal in the form of a woman could be a lot more fun to a lonely man. Was there anything this slob did not know about Phaze? Or any limit to his Crudity of insinuation? Stile allowed a little ire to show deliberately. It is a different frame, sir, with different natural laws. Those animals have human intelligence. The citizen gleefully pounced on this. So, you have sampled the wares of the mares and the breeches of the bitches. He was hardly paying attention to the backgammon game in his voyeuristic lust. He wanted to make Stile angry, and in seeming success, he was letting the means preempt the ends. This was always ethically problematical, and often strategically unsound. The citizen was setting himself up for a fall. If only the luck evened out. Stile had a good roll of the dice. He hit 2 blots, and the citizen hardly noticed. I don't see that it is any of your business, sir. No disrespect intended. With animals, the citizen exclaimed, smiling broadly. You admit it! I don't deny it, sir, Stile said, obviously nettled. And did they bother to change form each time? The citizen demanded, almost drooling. He was hardly looking at the board, playing automatically and poorly. Maybe sometimes a bitch stayed in her dog form, just for the novelty? Stile wondered just what sort of bestiality lurked in the secret dreams of this nasty man. Perhaps this was a phenomenon of projection, in which a person with illicit desires projected the realization of certain acts onto others. The citizen was giving himself away without realizing it. Stile continued to parry him verbally, taking the worst of it, though he had the ability to reverse the onus at any time. He was tacitly egging the man on. Meanwhile, he exploited the rolls of the dice skillfully, and soon had gained a net advantage. The citizen could have prevented this, had he been paying similar attention. But his morbid fascination with Stile's supposed exploits with shape-changing females had done him in. By the time he became aware of the trap, it was too late. Even his amazing luck could not make up for his squandered opportunities. They entered the final stage, and both men resumed bearing off men. For once, Stile had better throws of the dice, and finished 2 men ahead. It took a moment for the citizen to absorb the significance. He had been so far ahead, he knew subjectively that it would take a prohibitively massive turn of fortune to deprive him of victory. No such turn had occurred. Now his eyes fixed on the number 64 at the top of the doubling cube, and he saw that this narrow margin of 2 pieces had at one stroke washed him out of the tourney. You must visit Phaze some day, sir, Stile said brightly. I know just the bitch for you.